In just 42 seconds, what began as a standard political discussion exploded into one of the most explosive confrontations in late-night television history. Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, known for her sharp wit and unwavering principles, found herself face-to-face with Bill Maher's trademark smugness, and she wasn't having any of it. The verbal fireworks that erupted would leave the studio audience stunned, producers scrambling, and Maher himself visibly shaken as his guest dismantled his arguments piece by piece before ultimately storming off the set in what can only be described as television gold. The tension was palpable from the moment Crockett walked onto the real-time set. Maher, sporting his usual self-satisfied smirk, had clearly done his homework, or so he thought. The show's pre-interview segments had hinted at a discussion about criminal justice reform, but anyone paying attention to Maher's recent commentary could sense he was itching for a fight about something much more controversial. "So Jasmine," Maher began, leaning back in his chair with that familiar condescending tone, "you've been pretty vocal about police reform. But let's talk about something the Democrats seem to avoid: crime rates in major cities. Don't you think your party's soft-on-crime approach is actually hurting the communities you claim to represent?" Crockett's eyes narrowed slightly, but her voice remained measured. "Bill, I think you're starting with a false premise. What you call soft-on-crime is actually evidence-based reform that addresses root causes rather than just throwing people in cages and hoping for the best." "Oh, come on," Maher interrupted, already showing his cards. "You can't seriously tell me that cashless bail and defunding police departments is making anyone safer. I mean, even some of your Democratic colleagues are backing away from this stuff." The audience stirred uncomfortably. This wasn't the thoughtful policy discussion they'd been expecting. Crockett leaned forward, her media training kicking in as she recognized the trap being set. "First of all, Bill, let's be clear about what defund the police actually means, because I know you're smart enough to understand nuance when it serves your arguments." Her tone had an edge now. "We're talking about reallocating resources to address mental health, education, and poverty, the actual drivers of crime. But I suppose that's not as catchy for your monologue material." Maher's smile faltered for just a moment. He wasn't used to guests pushing back this early, especially not with such precision. "Look, I'm just saying what a lot of Americans are thinking. When they see videos of smash-and-grab robberies in San Francisco or carjackings in Chicago, they're not thinking about root causes. They're thinking about safety." "And there it is," Crockett said, her voice rising slightly. "You're doing exactly what every lazy pundit does, cherry-picking viral videos to paint a picture that doesn't reflect reality. Crime statistics show that violent crime has actually decreased in most major cities, but that doesn't fit your narrative, does it?" The studio audience was completely silent now, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Maher's usual guests typically played along with his provocations, offering mild pushback before eventually conceding his points. Crockett was playing by entirely different rules. Maher shifted in his seat, his discomfort becoming more apparent. "Okay, but you have to admit that progressives have gone too far on some of this stuff. I mean, when you have district attorneys refusing to prosecute shoplifting—" "Which DAs?" Crockett interrupted sharply. "Give me names, give me specific policies, give me data. Or are you just regurgitating Fox News talking points now?" The host's face reddened slightly. He clearly hadn't expected this level of preparation from his guest. This isn't about Fox News. This is about common sense." "Common sense?" Crockett laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Bill, common sense is recognizing that our current criminal justice system has failed spectacularly. We have the highest incarceration rate in the world, and yet you're sitting here acting like the problem is that we're not tough enough. That's not common sense, that's willful ignorance." The temperature in the room had shifted dramatically. What started as Maher's typical needling had evolved into something much more serious. His other panelists, a moderate Republican strategist and a centrist journalist, sat quietly, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Maher tried to regain control, his voice taking on that patronizing tone he reserved for guests he felt were getting too uppity. "Jasmine, I think you're being a little defensive here. I'm not attacking you personally." "Actually, you are," Crockett cut him off. "You invited me here under the pretense of discussing criminal justice reform, but what you really wanted was to put the angry black woman in her place for having opinions that make white liberals uncomfortable. Well, congratulations, Bill. You're about to get exactly what you asked for. The studio fell dead silent. Even the cameras seemed to pause, as if the operators weren't sure they should keep rolling. Maher's mouth opened slightly, clearly unprepared for such a direct accusation. His usual arsenal of jokes and deflections suddenly seemed inadequate. That's not what this is about," he stammered, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. "Isn't it?" Crockett pressed, her composure never wavering despite the fire in her eyes. "Because from where I'm sitting, this feels awfully familiar. You bring on black women, let us get comfortable, then spring some loaded questions designed to make us look unreasonable. It's the same playbook you've been running for years, and frankly, I'm tired of it." The audience was riveted. This wasn't just a political disagreement anymore, it was a reckoning. And as Maher struggled to find his footing, it became clear that Congresswoman Crockett was just getting started. But Maher, true to form, couldn't leave well enough alone. His ego, bruised and bleeding from Crockett's surgical precision, demanded he strike back. The smug expression returned to his face as he leaned forward, clearly believing he was about to deliver a knockout punch. "You know what, Jasmine? This is exactly the problem with your generation of politicians," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Everything is about race with you people. Can't we have one conversation about policy without you playing the race card?" The words hung in the air like poison gas. The Republican strategist visibly cringed, knowing Maher had just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The journalist's eyes widened in shock. Even the usually poker-faced production crew behind the cameras exchanged uncomfortable glances. Crockett's reaction was immediate and devastating. She sat back in her chair, a cold smile spreading across her face that would have made seasoned prosecutors nervous. "You people?" she repeated slowly, savoring each word like fine wine. "Bill, did you just say 'you people' to a black congresswoman on national television?" Maher's face went white as he realized what he'd done. "No, I meant I was talking about politicians, not—" "Oh, you meant politicians," Crockett interrupted, her voice now carrying the weight of decades of righteous anger. "But funny how when white politicians talk about economics, it's policy. When they talk about healthcare, it's governance. But when I talk about a criminal justice system that disproportionately targets people who look like me, suddenly I'm playing the race card. Isn't that convenient?" The host was scrambling now, sweat beginning to form on his forehead under the studio lights. "That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said, Bill. And you know what? I'm glad you said it. Because now everyone watching can see who you really are when the cameras are rolling and you think you're among friends." Crockett's voice was steady, controlled, but there was molten steel beneath the surface. Maher tried to recover, falling back on his trademark deflection tactics. "Look, I've been doing this show for 20 years. I've had more black guests than what?" Crockett's voice cut through his explanation like a blade. "Than other white liberal hosts? Congratulations on clearing that incredibly low bar, Bill. You want a cookie?" The audience was completely silent now, afraid to even breathe. This wasn't the usual political theater they were accustomed to. This was raw, unfiltered truth, being delivered with surgical precision, and everyone in the room could feel it. "I've had Barack Obama on this show," Maher protested weakly. "And I'm sure he was very polite to you," Crockett replied, her tone now openly mocking. "But I'm not Barack Obama, Bill. I'm not going to smile and nod while you spout recycled talking points that wouldn't pass muster in a freshman political science class." The other panelists remained frozen, clearly unsure whether to intervene or simply hope the cameras would stop rolling. The Republican strategist, ironically, looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world rather than witnessing a fellow conservative commentator's complete dismantling. Maher made one final attempt to regain control of the narrative. "You're being completely unreasonable here. I invited you on this show to have a civilized discussion." "Civilized?" Crockett's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Bill, there's nothing civilized about ambushing your guest with bad faith arguments and racist dog whistles. There's nothing civilized about pretending your platform doesn't come with responsibility. And there's damn sure nothing civilized about telling a black woman she's playing the race card when she points out systemic inequalities." The host's desperation was becoming palpable. His usual bag of tricks, the knowing looks to the audience, the dismissive chuckles, the attempts at witty comebacks were all failing him. "I never said You said exactly what you meant to say, Crockett interrupted, standing up from her chair now, her presence commanding the entire studio. And now you're trying to gaslight me and everyone watching into thinking we didn't hear what we just heard. But here's the thing, Bill. I'm not one of your usual guests who's going to let you get away with it. The tension in the room was suffocating. Camera operators were frantically signaling to their directors, unsure whether to keep rolling or cut to commercial. The live audience sat in stunned silence, watching what felt like a historical moment unfold before their eyes. Maher's voice cracked slightly as he made one last desperate attempt. Jasmine, please, let's just what? Crockett's voice rose for the first time, years of frustration and anger finally breaking through her professional composure. Let's pretend this didn't happen? Let's sweep it under the rug so you can do the same thing to the next black woman who has the audacity to disagree with you. The congressman took a step closer to Maher's desk, her eyes blazing with an intensity that made the veteran host visibly shrink back in his chair. The power dynamic in the room had completely shifted, and everyone could feel it. You want to know what's really pathetic, Bill? Crockett's voice was deadly quiet now, forcing everyone in the studio to strain to hear her. It's not just that you're a racist. Hell, half of Hollywood is. It's that you're a coward about it. You hide behind this liberal facade, this "I'm one of the good ones" act, while perpetuating the same tired stereotypes that keep people like me fighting battles we shouldn't have to fight in 2025. Maher opened his mouth to respond, but Crockett held up a hand that silenced him more effectively than any shout could have. No, you've talked enough. For once in your miserable career, you're going to listen. Her voice began to rise again, carrying the weight of every slight, every microaggression, every condescending comment she'd endured in her political career. You sit here every week, pontificating about progressive values, while turning black women into your personal punching bags for cheap laughs and applause from your predominantly white audience. The camera captured Maher's face perfectly. The color had drained from his cheeks, and his usual sardonic expression had been replaced by something approaching genuine fear. He looked like a man who had finally picked a fight with someone who could actually finish it. And the most insulting part? Crockett continued, her voice now carrying throughout the entire studio. You probably went home last night thinking you were going to school me today. You probably practiced your little gotcha questions in the mirror, imagining how you'd put the uppity black congresswoman in her place. Well, congratulations, Bill, you got exactly what you wanted. The Republican strategist was now openly staring, his mouth slightly agape. The journalist had pulled out her phone, likely texting her editor that she was witnessing television history. Even the usually stoic production crew was transfixed by the verbal execution taking place before them. Maher finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a croak. Jasmine, I think you're overreacting. Overreacting? The word exploded from Crockett's mouth like a gunshot, causing several audience members to actually jump in their seats. Bill, I am reacting exactly as I should to a washed-up comedian who thinks his HBO contract gives him permission to disrespect elected officials on national television. She began walking around his desk now, like a prosecutor circling a defendant. You want to talk about overreacting? Let's talk about your entire career. 20 years of the same tired act. I'm edgy. I say what everyone's thinking. Well, here's what everyone's really thinking, Bill. You're a relic. A dinosaur. A has-been who peaked in the Clinton administration and has been coasting on name recognition ever since. The silence in the studio was deafening. Every person present knew they were witnessing something that would be replayed and analyzed for years to come. This wasn't just a political disagreement or even a heated argument. This was a complete and total dismantling of a media figure's entire persona, delivered with the precision of a master surgeon and the fury of a woman who had reached her breaking point. You know what the saddest part is? Crockett asked, her voice now carrying a note of genuine pity. You actually had a chance to be better than this. You had a platform, influence, the ability to actually contribute something meaningful to political discourse. Instead, you chose to be a bottom feeder, feeding off controversy and conflict, like some kind of media parasite. Maher's hands were visibly shaking now as he reached for his water glass. The confident, smirking host who had welcomed Crockett to the show barely an hour ago had been completely replaced by a broken man who looked like he wanted nothing more than for the floor to open up and swallow him whole. "I want you to remember this moment, Bill," Crockett said, leaning down so she was speaking directly into his face. "I want you to remember what it feels like when someone refuses to play your little games. When someone calls you out on your bullshit, instead of just taking it with a smile and saying thank you for having me on your show." She straightened up, smoothing down her blazer with the practiced ease of someone who had just delivered a closing argument in a murder trial. "Because this is your new reality. We're not going to smile and nod anymore. We're not going to let you hide behind it's just comedy or I was taken out of context. We're going to call you exactly what you are, a bigot in liberal clothing." The audience was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. Several members were openly recording with their phones, knowing they were witnessing something extraordinary. The other panelists remained frozen, uncertain whether they should attempt to intervene or simply hope the cameras would eventually stop rolling. Maher made one final desperate attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. "Jasmine, please, if we could just—" "No." The word came out with such finality that it seemed to physically push Maher back in his chair. "There's no just anything, Bill. There's no walking this back. There's no editing this out. This is who you are, and now everyone knows it." Crockett began gathering her belongings, her purse, her notes, her dignity, all of which remained perfectly intact while Maher's lay in smoldering ruins around him. "You know, when I agreed to come on this show, my staff warned me this might happen. They said you had a pattern of trying to ambush guests, particularly women of color. I told them I could handle it." She paused, looking directly into the nearest camera. "I was right." She turned to face Maher one final time, her expression now almost serene in its calm confidence. "Good luck explaining this to your producers, Bill. Good luck explaining it to your advertisers. And good luck explaining it to yourself when you're lying awake at 3 a.m, wondering how a routine interview turned into the end of your credibility." Without another word, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett walked off the real-time set with the poise and dignity of someone who had just delivered a masterclass in how to dismantle a bully. The studio remained silent for several long seconds after she disappeared through the exit, the weight of what had just transpired settling over everyone present like a heavy blanket. Bill Maher sat alone at his desk, staring blankly at the space where his guest had been standing just moments before, looking like a man who had just watched his entire career implode in real time. The cameras finally stopped rolling, but the damage was already done. In the span of one explosive segment, Jasmine Crockett had done what 20 years of critics, boycotts, and controversies had failed to accomplish. She had completely and utterly exposed Bill Maher for exactly what he was, and she had done it with a grace and power that would be remembered long after his show was nothing more than a footnote in television history.